Suddenly, I had this feeling again when you know you're in trouble.
This is George Schleckek.
The one and only.
Hello, and welcome to Bicycle Touring Talk, episode 26. In this series, I talk about the adventures of my first major bicycle tour that took place in the winter of 2009-2010. In the last episode, I told you about my riding in the mountains and the high desert of Veracruz and Puebla, visiting the towns of Perote and El Seco. I left El Seco relatively early after enjoying a good breakfast at a little restaurant just down the street from the hotel and chatting with an ambitious used car salesman who must have thought I might buy a car. I was unsure how far I'd take it that day, but it was a toss-up between Ciudad Cerdán and somewhere near Orizaba. I just had to see how the day was going to shape up. At least there were places to stop within reach. Ciudad Cerdán looked imposing from the perfectly straight road leading up to it. Some beautiful old buildings were way up on a hill, while other parts of the town were down below. When I finally arrived there, it was time for lunch. I found a little restaurant and sat down for a meal. Then something out of the ordinary happened. 3 men walked in and approached me in an awkward fashion. Suddenly, I had this feeling you get when you know you're in trouble. Perhaps these men were cops? But at the moment, I was worried they might be criminals who were out to get me. Why did they have their eyes set on me? As it turned out, they were crew working for a local TV station. Somehow they had spotted my loaded bike in front of the restaurant and seen the potential for a story on the television news that evening, New Year's Eve 2009. I agreed to an interview once I was done eating. Of course, my Spanish wasn't really fit for a TV interview, but the man in charge said it didn't really matter, and his crew proceeded with the interview. Where had I come from? How many kilometers did I ride per day? What was my motivation? And so on. It wasn't easy answering those kinds of questions in Spanish, but somehow I managed to pull off a pretty decent interview, and my insecurity changed into a form of pride. People actually thought my trip was newsworthy. At the end of the interview, the leader of the crew passed me a business card and asked if it would be alright to follow me for a few kilometers and shoot some footage of me cycling. Of course, I agreed, but at the same time I was still nervous. Those guys might turn out to be kidnappers after all. Everything had been so random, and their equipment, including the car they were using, was not top-of-the-line stuff like you would expect from a TV station. I asked what station they worked for, and the man pointed to the card in my hand. Yes, it had to be legit, I told myself. We left the restaurant, and the crew stayed with me for about 5 kilometers or so, filming me going up some mild hills that somehow seemed much easier to climb knowing I was on camera. The whole thing gave me a boost for quite a distance. Then I reached the point where a boost was no longer needed. All I really needed were my brakes, and for the bike to be in good shape. When I had started my little round trip in Veracruz, I had been baffled by how many hills I have had to climb. It had seemed that this was not going to end. However, as I probably mentioned before, the advantage of gaining altitude is that a descent always follows. Somewhere, sometime later. This one was long overdue. It was on a smooth toll road with a wide paved shoulder that was leading back toward Veracruz. For lack of a working speedometer, I cannot say how fast I was going, except that I was keeping up with the cars nicely. Thankfully, there were not too many of them, or this would have felt like a suicide mission. It was also impossible to tell how much distance I covered in a minimal time frame. But as soon as the steep descent ended, slowing me down to a disappointing, normal bicycle speed, I felt how tired I actually was and decided to take the next exit. It turned out that I had not quite reached Orizaba, the large nearby town on my map, but a charming community called Ciudad Mendoza. After some searching, I found a great little hotel in my typical price range, $15. It was a nice place. Access to the rooms was via a good-sized yard featuring a pool in the center. Unfortunately, the pool was out of service. The staff, all members of the same family, also had some problems with the water supply. In order to have enough water for the showers, they had a little pump puttering away in the yard, pretty much right in front of my door. After the usual routine of checking in and making myself at home, I had a shower and then tried to watch TV for a bit, but fell asleep almost right away. When I woke up, it was dark outside. This was New Year's Eve and not even 7 o'clock. I felt an urge to get up and check out some festivities, meet some locals and have fun. At that moment, it was easier said than done. Not much was going on, and I didn't even know where the town center was yet. I took my time exploring, and I was prepared to hop into just any bar with local people or anything that would give me access to a nice way to ring in the new year. Eventually, I found a busy hamburger stand on the sidewalk. It reminded me that I was also hungry. Una hamburguesa, por favor, I asked the guy when it was my turn. He unwrapped a patty for me and threw it on the grill.
Americano?
He asked. No, I replied. Canadiense. He went on to tell me that his name was Miguel and that he had just returned home from working in the US for 12 long years. He and his wife had run a bakery in Seattle. They had saved their earnings and were now building a nice house of their own in their hometown. He said he had liked living in the US, but life was better here. People were different, less in a hurry, and more genuine. We continued the conversation as I was standing there enjoying my burger. He wanted to know what brought me to Ciudad Mendoza. So I told him about my bike tour and about the teaching job that I might get in Veracruz. His eyes lit up and he promptly invited me to a New Year's party at his dad's house.
Can you come back around 10?
He asked. As it turned out, that was when he was shutting down the hamburger stand for the night. Of course, I accepted the invitation. When I returned at 10, Miguel was busy loading up the hamburger stand onto his little pickup. We then went to his house where I first got to meet his wife and 2 kids. The house was not quite finished, but it was a large, beautiful place that would have fit into an upper-class neighborhood just about anywhere. Miguel and his extended family had done all the work themselves. It was truly impressive. The celebration, however, was taking place at Miguel's dad's place, which turned out to be just across the street from where the burger stand had been set up. When we arrived, I was introduced to the rest of the family, who all welcomed me with open arms. They asked me questions about what I thought of Mexico and how I had managed to come so far on the bicycle. We were still chatting as we were setting up plastic tables and chairs in the yard. Everyone was contributing in some way. The women were in the kitchen preparing food. The meal that followed was a bit of a surprise. There was chicken, a variety of vegetables, black beans, and Kraft dinner a la Mexicana. Macaroni and cheese was a welcome change from the typical Mexican diet of rice and beans. I found the combination of Kraft dinner and black beans to be especially delicious. After the meal, the entire family turned their attention to a colorful piñata. a cardboard replica of Winnie the Pooh that was hung up on a clothesline. Family members would take turns trying to hit it hard with a broomstick while their eyes were covered and after being led around in a circle so they'd lose all orientation. The kids got their shots first, but then everybody in the family, including Grandma, and finally me, got to take a turn at beating Winnie. The idea was to destroy the sculpture and get out the candy that was hidden inside of it. It all seemed easy at first, but turned out to be difficult without vision or orientation. The game went on until the piñata was completely destroyed and there was candy all over the floor, more than enough for the whole family. When midnight finally came, the adults got to enjoy a couple of shots of tequila, which was the only alcohol at this party. Outside there were fireworks everywhere. Pretty much everybody in the family party was joining the fun by lighting up and throwing something. Firecrackers, sparkling sticks, and what have you. It was fun. Everybody was having a good time in the family atmosphere. The party ended shortly after 12:30. I said goodbye to everyone and a big thank you to Miguel, the guy from the hamburger stand, who is now my friend. We exchanged contact information, but to my surprise, he did not have an email address. Looking back, New Year's in Ciudad Mendoza was definitely one of the highlights of my tour. I had stumbled into it totally unexpected. Ciudad Mendoza had not even been on my original agenda, but I had ended up there and found what I had been missing for much of my tour, which was good company for an unforgettable evening. The surprises continued through the next morning, when after getting up and taking yet another cold shower, I walked across the town some more in search of a place to eat breakfast. On one of the narrow sidewalks, I literally bumped into a very attractive woman who didn't seem to mind, and she asked me what I was up to. For a few seconds, I wondered if she might have an agenda. But when she came across as genuine, we started chatting.
¿Desayuno?
She asked. I nodded.
Ven conmigo.
We went through a few narrow streets as she led me to the local market, where her family was apparently running a food stand. Within minutes, I was introduced to everyone and invited for breakfast. They were all curious about where I was from and what had brought me to their town. When I explained that I was from Canada and had arrived on a bicycle, they had a lot of questions. Once again, I didn't mind telling my story, including the part about possibly landing a teaching job in Veracruz. When I offered to pay for the meal for both Veronica, the girl who had invited me, and myself, the lady in charge declined. As it turned out, she was Veronica's aunt. After the breakfast, Veronica showed me around town some more. It was New Year's Day and she had the day off. It was almost painful when I had to tell her about my plan to leave Ciudad Mendoza that same day, due to the deadline for my return to Veracruz. Looking back on it now, I probably could have stayed another day, but I had no idea what the road ahead had in store for me. We finally exchanged email addresses and hugged. We were basically strangers, but it already felt like saying goodbye to a friend. To this day, I have not heard from Veronica again. I hit the road again a little later that day, destination Cordova. It was a relatively short ride, along the same toll road that had led me to Ciudad Mendoza. Cordova was a much bigger city, and this meant much more traffic. After getting lost in the outskirts for some time, I eventually found a hotel right downtown. Not exactly a nice place, but the rate was only around $12. Some would find Cordova ugly and dirty. To me, the city had a lot of charm, and I didn't regret having planned for an extra day to explore it. In the evening, it became apparent that there were plenty of bars in this town which all seemed to be really busy. That was when all my usual caution went out the window, and for the first time since coming to Mexico, I went bar hopping till late at night. It was worth it, even though I remember very little of the people I met and talked to. The change of scenery and the interaction with random strangers for no specific purpose felt great. Even much later, when I walked back toward my hotel, a little under the influence, the city was still busy. While the stores were closed, some bars seemed to be busy all night, and outside was a freak show made up of food vendors and prostitutes that could be either male or female. One middle-aged black woman acted insulted after I turned her down, telling me that she was an actual woman. She seemed like quite the character, so I offered to buy her a taco in exchange for a few minutes of her time just so I could chat with her some more. But she had other ideas that involved more of my money, so I left. I did a lot of walking on my extra day in Córdoba. My curiosity had me all over town once again. It was fun to explore yet another Mexican city on foot, my way and at my own pace. I have always enjoyed watching people go about their business, and it tends to be most interesting as an observer, somewhat detached. I did plenty of people watching in Córdoba and found out that Mexicans generally don't rush around like their neighbors to the north. Many actually took the time to say hello and engage in a little chat. Even some of the most attractive women were open to a random conversation. Córdoba was a good time. On January 3rd, I had to leave Córdoba. I had to get to Veracruz in a day for my interview at Kiosk International. It should have been an easy ride on a mostly flat or descending toll road. That was how it started. But then, something unexpected happened.
Of course, if you want to know what the unexpected was, you could subscribe to my channel and I'll tell you all about it in the next episode. Or you could order my book that is called Destinations Are Fake by following the link in the description of this video. And I thank you for it already.